Welcome to the WorkingAudioTools podcast, the home of all things mixing and mastering on this very fine scientific phenomena called the tinterweb. I'm Ed Thorne, this is Paul Third, and we are still rabbit-holing stuff. This may come as no surprise. It is no surprise to us. We bore each other, we bore ourselves with rabbit-holing mindless stuff, except it's not mindless because it is in the detail, in the attention to detail, where we learn, especially for characters like myself and Paul, who are very detail and OCD-driven people.
Very.
And Paul wanted to take our mix comparison from last week, of which I've left because I've been far too busy moving house. And Paul has rabbit-holed himself into an early grave. Possibly overthinking, but definitely analysing his monitoring setup and the limitations of monitoring. And I had also stumbled across a problem where I had hyper-focused on the wrong detail and then pendulum swung the tilt of a mix I was working on the wrong way. And yeah, I got very despondent and I just had to sack it off for a week, which was good because I had to move house. So that gave me an ample distraction. Anyone who's moved house, holy smoke, it's a lot of work. And I don't even have kids and a busy work schedule at the moment. Anyway, moving swiftly on. There are lots of limitations to monitoring, Paul, because every piece of monitoring has its own limitation.
Yes.
And it is my belief that we need to get an average of all the systems we have for effective mixed translation. But my key issue with this is that can often lead to, I've written down, speaker opinion paralysis.
Yeah.
Which one is right? How do you know which one is right? Well, you don't. You have to get an average, which means you have to learn the key characteristics that each speaker is delivering to you. And this is where you should definitely take over.
Yeah, so I was going to do this video on my own channel. So that was going to be basically a rebuttal to the video I made. I got like over 70,000 views, mental. And it was, it was all about, how studio and hi-fi is just, it's all bullshit. You know what I mean? You kind of say that, like fucking Yamaha HS fucking 5s are studio, but, like Dan Clark Stealth, tuned to Harman, it's hi-fi and not studio. And yeah, it's all just bollocks used by, marketers to market you certain things for certain demographics. It's bollocks because obviously you think about the Hifimans that we use for mixing and stuff and people say they're hi-fi. Yeah, well, blah, 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 blah. Watch that video, right? And everybody else was, from the looks of it. So, one comment I was getting a lot, and me being me, it was getting to me, grating to me after, because it was a big video, hundreds of comments. After the 50th comment, I was like, right, okay, I need to make a rebuttal. And that comment that I kept on getting was, if you learn your monitoring, you can mix. All you've got to do is get it doesn't matter what it is, could be Sony MDR7506s, many people said that, and you can get amazing mixes as long as you learn what good music sounds like on them. So if you get a Serbian mix and you learn what that music sounds like on it, all you've got to do is replicate that. Bish bash bosh, you've got yourself a fucking professional mix. When the frustrating thing is, in reality, that does not work. Like, I did an entire video shootout, right? A speaker shootout. And I took, I think it was 5 different speakers, and I'd done the same Mark Daniel Nelson mix. And the aim of the game was to get the multi-track and try and like one-to-one it as close as I could. So I was trying to get every mix to sound near identical as I could to Mark Daniel Nelson's final master. And what I found was that on every single mix that I did, the mix never sounded like the mix when I stuck it on another monitoring. So the Focal Alpha Twins, right? The Focal Alpha Twins translated horribly. In the room, they sounded amazing. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I love these speakers. Put them on everything else, put them on the Hifimans. And I remember I sent it to Ed and he was like, yeah, this isn't a good mix. It was muddy, it was dark.
I doubt I'd have said that, but...
Yeah, you did, because I think you had the rest of the mixes to go on.
I probably said it was a shite mix. No.
Ed loved the Focal Shape mix. He was like, wow. Like, he's like, wow.
There was one noticeably better than the other, yeah.
Yeah. And Ed was like, wow, that is amazing how like much I like that mix, but I don't like this one. And it was the same brand, but I was like Alpha, but it was Shapes. And I did Calais, Edifiers, I think I did another one.
Hi-fi speakers. Ooh.
I know, hi-fi speakers. But, it's one of these things that what that taught me was that just because something sounds right in the room doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate like that outside of the room.
PSIs.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is why I wanted to do it on here, because I think it's better to have a conversation with Ed, because he's got experience that I don't have. So I've never had expensive monitors in the studio. The most expensive monitors that are in the studio right now are the iLoud MTM Precisions. They're about, I think, £1,800 a pair, or close to £2,000. It's like around that. Ed's PSIs were close to £10,000. And Ed, if you've watched the journey on this podcast and you can listen back to those mixes, Ed would argue to death about certain things. And it got to a point where Ed was, I remember we'd done a mix, and I think it was a sampled piano. And you were like, oh, there's phasing problems. There's phasing problems. There's phasing problems. Yeah, how can you not hear that? And you spent ages trying to fix it. And I was like, nobody else could fix it. And there was loads of other stuff that were actually things that needed to be fixed. But it was like the PSIs had this level of detail, especially in the top end. Right? They're so detailed. But from a mix translation point of view, it wasn't really working. The low end wasn't working. Again, we filmed the low end to be coloured. We didn't really I don't really like the top end in them. The subs weren't really working. And then all of a sudden, Ed switched, still to expensive pair of speakers, but he got a pair of speakers that worked better in his room. Now, the important thing to bear in mind is that there is a speaker for every room, and there's a speaker for every room for every person in that room. So you've got many variables that's very difficult. So you can take the Alpha Twins, and the Alpha Twins may sound like perfect, in another room, but in my room, they just didn't work. The edifiers, I think, work really well in here. I tuned them again. I realised I had too much low end in them. And I took down the low end. I was like, oh, that's it there. And you've got to the point where I'm going to get rid of the IN5s tonight. They're coming down. I just can't do it anymore. I just they just don't tell me really the truth. I think they've not got the transit details. The phase coherence isn't there. And, that brings me on to what the episode was going to be about on my channel was what I've done in my studio is actually very uncommon, which is crazy on the internet. Professional mix engineers, they've done this. But what many people don't talk about or understand is that confirmation bias, what that does is it basically forces you to not see the negatives and not to see the limitations. Because you invest in something, you're like, no, it's right. I still remember having a conversation with Ed, and I was like, trust me, Ed, the nanos will tell you everything in the low end. And he was like, what? Fuck off. It's like £9,000 speakers and you shitty fucking £400 hi-fi headphones. He's laughing because that's fucking as arrogant as he was. And then look, what's he doing now? Ditched the PSIs. Now he's fucking, mixing low end on fucking nanos. You know what I mean? So
I object to the word arrogant. I was fueled by confirmation bias. I'm now humble enough to admit that.
If you read those back, I was arrogant. But yes, confirmation bias is a really tough thing. We've got a whole episode talking about that, done really well. But what I found really enlightening is forcing yourself to mix on stuff and then having lots of different monitoring options to then test a mix that you think really well on other systems. So right now, as what Ed said, I've been rabbit hole in this mix that we did last week, and I've been trying to get it better, trying to go at it. And what I found is that, well, I know it anyway, but I've really pushed the Ananda Nanos to their absolute limits. And Ed was talking about that on his mix last week, how I was saying it had lots and lots of side information. And I always say to people when they're mixing with Ananda Nanos, always use a headphone for, sound staging or against speakers. They're amazing for low end, drums, center image, punch, transient response, vocal levels. But what I found is that due to the sound staging, it can be quite difficult. So I've been struggling with the low end to a point where I've got it sounding the way I like it. It's just I want it to translate really well to other systems. And so it's really a case of me going through all the rest of them. So I went on the Calais and I was like, okay, maybe a little bit on the muddy-ish side. I can maybe get a little bit of detail in there, but I'm like, okay, this is sounding pretty good. Ed listened to it and was like, vocals are too loud. And yeah, I agree. I'm going to try to bring them down. And then I thought the snare was too loud, and he thought it was probably at the right level because it's adding energy.
It was pushing it. But the drummer in me was like, yeah, get in there, son.
Yeah, which basically means I'm going to probably have to bring it down maybe half a dB in reality.
Half a dB is what it is.
Yeah. So, but again, the reason that like I do experiments like this is so I know the complete limitations of these things that I'm working on. So like the nanos are now not going to be my, like do 70, 80%, like if I'm having to do things portably, I'm now going to try these and I'm going to learn the limitations of these. The Hifiman the Hifiman Ari Organics. They are a lot more natural. They have better soundstage. They're very akin to speakers. Like Ed thought they sounded quite similar to his Amphians.
They're a delightful set of speakers, yeah.
Yeah, so
headphones.
Yeah, so I'm going to try them and then go to the nanos because I know exactly where the nanos are perfect. Again, if I mix on those and then I go to the nanos, I can go, right, let's listen to the slam. One is the mix slamming. Two is the low end, right? It's the kick, right? It's basically the transients and the phase coherence, right? It's the center image bang on. But with those, I'll probably be able to get better sound staging. But again, I'll still have the HG1000 SEs. That's arguably the best sounding headphones I've ever heard. Everybody that's been in the studio, they're the one headphone that everybody puts back on. They just like adore them, especially music lovers. However, they're relaxed sounding, very relaxed. That's why Ed doesn't like them. Ed finds them too relaxed because he's a drummer. He's all about feel. He likes the punch. He likes the groove. You won't get the slam in HEs. You get all the reverb tails and all the resolution, and you can hear everything in the sound stage. But if you were trying to mix on the HEs the way that you would like them to be, your mix would sound overly punchy.
You just reminded me of the conversation we had when I was at yours, and he's like, "Yeah, just the HE1000s." Yeah, they just resolve. And I was like, explain what you mean by resolve, because sometimes we have to refine our definitions of terminology. Well, like the reverb tail kind of goes and then it just resolves. I was like, you've said that? What does that mean? Eventually, I think I translated Paul's meaning. It makes sense in my mind that it resolves, but it's not something we can explain.
But it does, doesn't it? When you understand the sound.
It resolves, isn't it? Yeah. The HE1000s are amazing, but they are, I think, you've got the nanos, which, as I learned in last week's mix, your comment was that there's too much side information. Totally true. There's a couple of things I need to back off and move. And that's because I did most of that mix on the nanos. Now, the nanos, great for that center channel, but what I did was, if the nanos are all kind of center, and then I was putting in lows aside because I wasn't hearing so much side because they don't deliver that so much. When you put them in a headphone or a speaker that does deliver side, you've got like way too much. Then the HE1000s are like all side. It's just like the space around the track. Yeah, I can see if you do your mix prep and general work on the organics, you're then in a really good place where you can refine the side and the wide stuff on the 1000s and then refine the center stuff on the nanos. But what's your plan in terms of order? Because I'd be tempted to go nanos, bass, kick, snare, vocals, HE1000s, synths, guitars, wide stuff, ARIA organics for mix checking. Are we good? Cool, let's go.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. But if I'm having to do a mix portably, like I can't get to the studio and I have to do most of it, portably with the Chord Mojo, then I'm taking the organics, and they're going to be like the middle ground where I know I can go to those two and get, a really good mix, because the slam, they still have a slam to them. The low end's still great, the transients are still great, and they just sound like a pair of speakers. But I'm toying between those and the LCD MX4s, because I think what I struggled with this nano mix was because they're so unbelievably tight, I was kind of left sitting there thinking, is this kind of what I was feeling a little bit about listening to a sealed speaker? So again, that's another limitation about sealed speakers if you think about the present day productions. Due to having a sealed speaker, the low end's very tight, which again, if you speak to guys like, I'm not going to say names because some of them don't like me saying stuff that they do, but I know one engineer who tells me that he loves ATCs because he's like, I love that low end, but I know tons of people that hate the low end of ATCs. if they've got the sealed one, not the port one, because you get some of them that are the sealed one, and they're like, there's just no low end in them. I think the Neumann KH310s, I think they're sealed. And what's interesting with the Neumanns being, well, just the KH310s, like the 420s, they're ported. The KH120s, 150s, they're all ported. But, the KH310s are sealed. And what you find a lot of people doing is using subs with them. So they'll always buy the Neumann sub because the sub fills out the low end. And that was something we felt with the present day production mum speakers. And I was wondering if that was the thing with the nanos that I was struggling with, is it maybe because the nanos are so fast, they don't give you that overwhelming, feel of like low end that the Odysseys give you. Like the Odysseys have this really big weight factor. You hear it in, snares and stuff like that. You hear that doof, doof of a snare. And you really, I'll be interested when I listen to the mix on the MX4s to see how quickly I can judge whether I did get the sub of the mix right or I didn't. Because if the MX4 say to me, no, you can push these a little bit more, then, you know what I mean, I could maybe then have another form of translation. But every single one of those headphones, regardless of price, has their limitations. MX4s, they have a little bit less limitations, because I do think they are a pretty good middle ground. However, the limitation is that they are too wide in their soundstage, so they definitely do need crossfeed. Then you need to mono the low end in those, because the bass is here, where you want the low end to be kind of here. That's how you hear it in speakers.
Yeah.
And I use real phones, and I've got the crossfeed to 120 degrees, which helps. And it's just a little bit of tucking, but you're still monoing the low end to a certain degree. And if you think of the speakers, like the PreSonus Era Studio 8s that I've got in front of me, they're just forward sounding, fully forward sounding, no depth. The limitations, the low end, again, with most budget speakers, your low end is going to be mushy and you're going to have no detail. You're going to find it really difficult to distinguish between kick and bass, which is what the nanos are absolutely amazing at, is being able to give you the information for that low end. The Kali IN5s, they lack phase coherence. They're not very phase coherent. They don't have a good phantom center. Transients, they're relaxed, they're soft sounding. However, the benefit to them is that a mix just has to sound balanced, and normally it's right. But even the fact that I was listening to that mix that we did last week on this, the tweaked one that I did, and I was like, I think the vocals are too loud, snares maybe a bit too loud. Ed heard the same thing, but that there wasn't anything really, because they're so much of an average sounding speaker without that much detail. It wasn't really like I could fully pinpoint anything in the low end, because it's a 5-inch speaker. So if you've got like a speaker that's like 5-inch, even like 6-inch, depending on the speaker, like the Edifiers, they've got this really, really amazing low end. But like IN5s, HS5, HS7s, you're going to struggle to get low end that you can trust. So you're probably going to need a subwoofer in them. Even if you think about the Kali LPs that I've got in the Atmos room, they've kind of got a bit of a muddiness to them. That's the Kali sound. The Kali sound is, not very fast, quite relaxed, a little bit boring.
It might not just be the Kali sound. It's also the budget speaker.
Yes,
sound
yeah.
It's impossible for them to be good at everything at the price point. So it's, but it's, is it for you then? Are they the kind of speaker that you've got better versions of and worse versions of, and therefore because they're in the middle, they're not so bad that they're indicative of consumer devices like my Anker soundbar, and they're not so good that you can do critical listening on, actually they might be redundant.
Yeah, I would say the Kalis really struggle on them, but the IN5s I do, because the thing is with that LP8s, because I've got the sub with the Atmos room, when I go to stereo I've got the sub, and the sub's really good, so that helps me fill out the transient response to the low end, so I get that punch. I can kind of hear low end better, and again it's a better
sub is
room.
Ridiculous in that room.
Yeah, and I tuned it. I've got that room.
You've not touched it since I was there, have you?
No, I have not.
I've
not touched that,
because that was it.
Yeah, I know it was. So again, but every room has its limitations. So the low end in this room I can't push as much in here. And there's Ed's PSIs, show that the PSIs didn't work in his room, but his Amphions, the 218s, which is the MTM design, works great. What I find really interesting was that I had a singer-songwriter in here to help me do a topping mic review, and I had him in the Atmos room, and I did it on purpose. So I got the audio app out because I can switch dead quick. So I was like, yeah, let's listen to the Callies in stereo. And he's like, wow, man, these are really good for like budget speakers, man. Like, wow, like these are good, man. Yeah, I'm impressed. And I was like, okay. Switched to the iLoud MTM Precisions, and he was like, holy shit. And then when I went back and forth, he was like, wow, these speakers do not sound anywhere near as good as I thought they did. And this is the thing, the internet, this is why I had to do it here, because I know it's a bit of a safer place, because I get chastised as this person that's like trying to tell everybody to buy loads of expensive shit. I'm not. I'm just trying to be real here, and he'll vouch for me. As the thing that Mark from Present Day Production said at once, and it's stuck with me ever since, is that once you hear something you've never heard before, you can never unhear it. So when you hear the quality of the MTM Precisions in that room, you almost cannot unhear it. Because when I go to the Callies, I hear its limitations. I hear
Pretty sure I've said that before Mark came on the podcast, but...
Oh, okay, Ed, okay.
Mark's opinion carries more weight than mine. No, it probably does. He's a very knowledgeable man. Yeah, but I would agree. And this is the bias of the internet when everyone says, yeah, Neumann 310s are the best speaker. No, they're the best speaker you've heard. Because I guarantee you put a better speaker next to them. Like, you're on about the Precisions, and I'm like, yeah, like, listen to the Amphion 218s. They're in another league again. For just different reasons that you've got to hear to believe. Hey there, Ed here. You may recognise my voice from doing all the other Distrokid advert segments. This time I didn't want to just do a typical advert talking about stuff to do with Distrokid. I actually wanted to give you my feedback about the service, because I genuinely do use Distrokid for uploading my music. And I know Paul does, and it turns out Dan Worrell does as well. I've used Distrokid since 2019. As you can see on the screen, I have 6 releases so far. It is genuinely super easy to use. The tracks get into Spotify within 24 hours, which is remarkable. Apple Music takes a little bit longer. I'd suggest giving that 10 to 14 days. The hyperfollow links are really useful for advanced promotion of your tracks, and the promo cards are really great visual aids for social media promotion. Ooh, I particularly like that one. Distrokid collect all the royalties from your streaming services, and here you can find an itemized breakdown of where all your income has come from. There's also a Distrokid referral where you can save your friends $10 per sign-up by creating your own VIP referral link. I think one thing I've learned in the last week, or I'm questioning, is I think the key to all of this mixed translation goes beyond speakers, goes beyond genre, goes beyond differences in personal hearing, and it even goes beyond objective opinions and preferences. It's learning how to trust your own ears. Now, for me, this can change. Thankfully, not too much, but I do notice some days I come and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, low end's going a bit today. Right, cool, I'm a bit more sensitive in that area.
Yeah.
Or like, I mean, I don't gig anymore, but if I'd done a drum gig, I'd be like, the next day I'd be like, yeah, cool, loads of top end. And then come in on Monday and be like, geez, right, we'll back that off a bit. Mm-hmm. So, even one of our, good mixed engineer friends is like, yeah, he's always saying, I don't trust my own ears. And he's got one of the best sets of ears in the country. So how do we trust our own ears, Paul?
Getting an average, and that is what the internet does not want to hear. The internet genuinely wants to believe that honestly, mate, I'm not joking, about 8 people commented saying that, oh yeah, I mix on Sony MDR 7506s. And this story all stems from fucking Andrew Scheps. I have nothing against Andrew Scheps. I like the moral of the story. But what people did was people took this story and they took out of context and they raveled it into the story that made people feel really good about themselves.
That's never happened in history.
Yes, I know.
Never has there been a book taken out of context.
Now, this is what's very important, right? Is that, yes, Andrew did use the Sony MDR 7506s as a mixing tool. And I think there were some Grammy-winning mixes he'd done where he would have used them on the mix. However, what's very, very, very important to understand and what people don't talk about is the fact that Andrew Scheps bought a pair of £70,000 PMCs.
Good lad.
There is a stark difference from headphones that I bought 2 weeks ago for £50 second-hand that have no low end and have no top end. They genuinely roll off at like 10, 11K or whatever. There is genuinely no top end. They sound like NS10s, but shit NS10s without the transient response. And I was listening to this going, how the fuck how could you judge? How could you judge this? And then another thing was that many people don't talk about is that he has moved to these. He now mixes on the Odyssey MX4s. And what was the comment that he said? Ever since I started mixing on the MX4s, I have had less sonic comments regarding my mixes. So I don't know if he's getting better feedback or he's having to do less recall notes. And this is what annoys me is that what the internet does is because lots of people could afford the Sony MDRs, it was like, yeah, Andrew Scheps. And then as soon as I would tell them, yeah, but you do know he's now mixing on, fucking nearly $3,000 headphones. Yeah, it's because he's paid. Yeah, he's paid by Odyssey. Yeah, he's doing trade shows for them. He's paid to say that. And I'm like,
in 20 years' time, there'll be some disgruntled little upstart on a podcast somewhere or whatever the 20-year feature version of the podcast is saying, yeah, Paul Third, yeah, he said mixed on the nanos, you can do anything on the nanos. And actually, 20 years later when he's a millionaire mix engineer, he's got a 70-grand PMC system.
But I mean, what's important, right? And the reason why I'm glad I've done it here, because I've got a better discussion here, because I had it all scripted and I was like, no, this is just going to turn into a fucking shit show. But what I love...
Do that video anyway, just for our entertainment.
I can't be fucked, man. I just can't be fucked. What I wanted to kind of discuss it here with Ed is because we have been in this rabbit hole and we're still in it. And, Ed's at an interesting kind of place just now where he has one expensive pair of monitors in the Head Type 20s and he's got an even more expensive pair of monitors with the 218s. Now he's got Amphion and Head, two very, very sounding speakers in his room. And Ed, you're in a place just now where you're like, this is telling me that, but this is telling me that. It's the same mix. And again, Ed's got Trinov and he's got Arc 4. I can't what you using Trinov with the Amphions and Arc with the heads.
No. Trinov is powering both sets of speakers because using Trinov, I could set both sets of speakers up with the subwoofer, which is what I rabbit holed this week. And long story short, I have... something was happening with the PSIs, with the subs. I thought it was the room, then I thought it was the speakers. Rabbit holed all that a year ago. I actually now think the crossovers in Trinov Nova are not very good because on 3 sets of speakers now, they've done something that I've not liked, and it's shaped the sound of the top speakers, as it were. And I A/B'd again because I was working this last week and saying to Paul, man, they just sound too different. And I went into Trinov and I bypassed the bass management and I was like, oh, hang on. Immediately they sound a little bit closer together. And then I went into settings and put the high pass in Trinov to 30 hertz, whereas I think I had it at 20 before to give the sub to do something. And this is different to this is the high pass filter of the processing. So nothing goes below 30 hertz now, whereas before it was, but the crossover was divvying it up between the sub and the tops. And doing that, again, the speakers came closer together again. I was like, well, now they make sense working together. It's not yin and yang. It's like, cool, like there's just slightly right and slightly left of center of each other. So, and again, today, I've come in today and I've been playing around with the bass management on Trinov. And with the bass management engaged and the crossover, the high pass at 20, there's just something that's making the speakers go too far in one direction. But without the bass management and without the crossovers in Trinov and with the high pass set to 30, reason for that being is the heads go down to 30, I think. It's doing something that I don't like. And it wasn't just the PSIs that this was happening on. This is now happening on 2 other sets of speakers. So I don't know if there's a problem, but I've always had some weird stuff surrounding the crossovers in Nova. And I'm not the only person to say this. I won't say who's agreeing with me on this, but it's not the first time I've heard that comment.
And what hopefully you're starting to get a picture is that even though me and him have got very, very expensive stuff in here, like when it comes to headphones, like I've got a lot of expensive shit here. Like fucking even these that I'm like a way to learn. These are like 900 quid. The MX4s are like 2.7. The HEs are 1400. I've got like fucking all those there. They're like 600 and odd or whatever. They just sent me the X1s that I'm trying out. You know, the Edifiers are like 600, 700. The MTMs are like 1800. You know, you're getting it. Like, I'm not showing off, but what I'm trying to show is that I have all of these different options and all of them sound different. And that's the thing that you need to understand is that, and this is the thing that it kind of clicked for me, even though I kind of knew it, but hearing somebody say it kind of, when sometimes you know something, but when somebody says it, it just clicks. And when I had Billy in, and he's got a pair of KRKs in his room, and he's just like treated his room and made all his own DIY custom panels after like seeing what I'd done. And what was really interesting was every time I switched from headphone to headphone to speaker, he was like, man, it's like my head's burst. It's like everything sounds different. He's like, I just thought kind of like everything kind of sounded the same. He's like, everything sounds different. Everything is giving you a different representation of the mix. I would do that differently on that, but I wouldn't do it on that, but I'd do that on that. And he's like, everything in here, I would change the mix slightly. So I was letting him listen to his own stuff. And that's the hard thing, is being able to, and that's why, you know, in the video and the script I had, like, it's all about finding monitoring that tells you the truth. And the only way you're going to know what tells you the truth is by, one, your clients, and two, you know, if things work on average. So like at the end of the day, I should listen to a mix on every single monitoring in here, and they are all calibrated, which is a very important thing. If you don't calibrate all your headphones to the same curve, and you kind of don't, you know, calibrate your speakers in the same way like what Ed's done with Trinov, then it's going to get even more different for you. But
my God, yes.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, right, even with all this calibration, if you think about a Spike, Serban, Jason, Manny, all the big top mixers, no matter what you listen on, the song still sounds amazing. And that is the key. If I listen to the fucking, you know, even the PreSonus, they're like fucking £400 a pair or whatever, I should still listen to them and go, the mix still makes sense. The bass sits there, the snare hits there, that hits there, it still sounds good. Where if I get to a point where the sounds amazing on those, but it sounds pretty shitty on those, there's something that's not telling me the truth.
And this is the genius of Bob Clearmountain. His mixes transcend technology.
Yeah, totally, I know.
When he was mixing, and it's like you hear mixes for vinyl on another sound system, they just sound awful. Like I remember doing live sound, you've got PA systems that are now very bass and top heavy. They've got that scoop. Because dance and EDM and a lot of modern stuff is very bass and top heavy. You put like an old vintage record on there, like a Motown track that's all middly, because the tape would destroy the top end and there'd be no low end because they mixed it out for vinyl, or they couldn't mix it because they couldn't reference it at the time. They sound awful. But what Bob Clearmountain does, and I think Spike and Serban and those guys are going to be able to do, although I don't foresee the technological changes that Clearmountain's managed to transcend, the mixes just sound incredible everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that guy really does deserve the accolades that he gets. I'm going to disagree with something you said about trusting your clients, because I don't think you can gauge the success of your monitoring off a third-party opinion.
That may be listening in an untreated bedroom to a pair of shitty monitors,
Yeah, with all due respect, the likelihood is they're not going to be listening as critically
good point.
As good a system in a treated environment. You know, they're not going to have the analytical control. They're not going to have ironed out. It's not going to be a controlled test, as it were, you know, in a laboratory setting comparison. What I thought today was reference tracks coming into this argument as well, or discussion. We've discussed at length learning what each speaker does, and there's a characteristic of each speaker in each headphone. For me, I listen to the Sennheiser HD490s, and it always highlights something in the vocals that doesn't translate. I listen on the NDH30s, and there's always something in the low end that's problematic. The Tantrum Angry boxes are amazing, because if you rely on the low end and the top end for energy, you've not got that. They're like a bandpass.
They're great
speaker.
for when you switch it, when you're on the nanos and you've got all that low end. You got all that low end, you got all that punch, you've got all that top end that you're trying to bring in as well to counter the low end, and you just switch on the tantrums, and does the mix work? You know what I mean? Does the mid-range work?
So you've got to learn little tricks that makes it translate, because they are kind of consumer devices. I have so much fun mixing on my Anchor soundbar for that reason. So you've got to learn what each speaker can do, and then understand what you've got to listen out for in your mix. Right, does it suffer from this? Okay, I know what to do, how to fix it. Right, I'm conscious this might be a problem. I need that headphone to check that. Cool, that's highlighted this as a problem. I know what I need to do about it. So I guess it's developing a toolbox for all this stuff, and it is learning how each speaker sounds with your reference materials. But something you mentioned a few times, you've found reference tracks for different mixes that we've talked about. Now, I wonder what I used to do, and I swear I had more success when I did this, maybe not, was listen to the same 5 or so tracks every day when I came into the studio to calibrate my hearing. And some days I think, oh, okay, I'm a bit more sensitive to the low end or the top end, fine, but I've calibrated it to those same tracks that I know inside out. That can go awry if you're taking on a new mix and listening to a new reference track that you don't know as well.
That's a good point.
Now, we have to reference stylistically for different genres, but is it a case of hopping between 3, one track that we know inside out, one reference track for the genre, and then our own mix?
I would say always, what we're always taught, always have the rough, because the rough is,
if you have one. We don't always get them.
Yeah, but if you do have a rough, always stick to the rough. But then, always have a reference mix that's kind of maybe what they're expecting. They might say like X, Y, Z is what I'm going for, and it turns out that that's Serbian or that's fucking Mani or whatever, and you can have certain tracks that work with it. Like with this mix that we were doing last week, Ed chose Blondie like style. I chose kind of the Dua Lipa modern sound, which was all getting the bass there, boom, 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 boom. So I had to mix
well,
a
I
very
identified
certain
Blondie was an influence, potentially. At least that's what that sounded most like to me. I didn't reference that from a mix point of view. I went totally modern. What you
mean. Yeah. So it's all about trying to be more detailed in your approach, and all the stuff what the internet says is just stuff that you want to hear. Like, I'm really, really sorry to be that guy. Like, you don't have to spend as much money as some people do. Like, you don't need to spend £70,000. But honestly, if you genuinely think that you can get, like a cheap pair of speakers in an untreated fucking room, and get a cheap pair of headphones with a shitty DAC and amp, you genuinely believe that you're going to be able to mix through that distortion, mix through that kind of low end that's just unclear and just you can't do anything about it, and think that that's going to translate against all the other people that's out there doing this professionally, you're just being really, really, really naive, and you've got to open yourself up to the limitations. Like, all I've done in this episode is talk about limitations, really. I'm like, as much as the HEs are one of the best sounding headphones for listening to music, again, I mentioned all the negative points of them. The MX4s, again, soundstage, I think they're narrowish sounding. Well, the MX4s don't have the separation. Hifimans have this amazing fucking separation. Even the Nanos have good separation. It's just that the alteration of where the balance of where the mid and the side is different, but the separation's different. Yeah. Where the MX4s are narrow in their separation, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult. But they sound great, but they need EQ'd very specifically.
But with your current EQ curve, they come alive.
Yeah, so because I don't know if I didn't really ask you, so you said that's a thumbs up for that EQ, yeah.
That's the best I've heard the MX4s sound. Yeah.
Totally, yeah. So, yeah, the MX4s have a thing where they have
let me just stop you, because people are going to be raging right now. What EQ curve are you talking about? Can we talk about it yet?
Not yet. So it's the engineer, it's Emra Chelik's engineer curve, which is still in beta. They are, we are still tinkering with things, and I've got just now a Patreon page. What we have now is we now have channel members. So I put a pinned comment on last week's video. So if you sign up to channel members, you'll get access
on the podcast.
I know. I don't even told them. I've set it all up and everything. So if you join channel members, you'll get a link to a Discord, and we have a separate Working Audio Tools chat in that Discord. It'll be mostly me, but if anything, that if you want to ask Ed, I'll get him involved and fucking be the middleman, right?
Send me a text and I can ignore you. Joking. Don't
So
send me a text.
it's a Discord that basically has all of the sub channels that I work with. So now when anybody comes to me, especially with headphone mixing, I should have done this years ago. Where if anybody comes to me and I'm like, I've already said that, or I'm so bored, tired of talking about that, I'll just say, look, sign up to the Patreon. You'll get a link, or the channel members, or you'll join the Discord server. There's sub channels. You've got headphone mixing, headphone EQs. So I'm now EQing people's headphones to the sound guy curve target, so people can try that, as well as the new beta Harman curve, which I'm going to make a video on. The new beta Harman curve is bollocks. The whole B and K measurement thing, that's another time for another video. But yeah, it's all bollocks. Harman, old school, 2008. Mwah. And then you've got Herman's. You've got Emra's engineer target, which for me is working better. I'm just still trying to learn it on all the monitoring because I've been used to Harman for fucking years. So it's getting used to that a little bit. But yeah, it's very, very, very difficult to try and think that you're going to get one piece of monitoring and learn them and think that that's going to like translate everywhere. Because what you need to understand is that you're only getting one perspective of the mix. And hopefully for what you've learned from this discussion is that every piece of monitoring that we have tells us something different about the mix. And it's all about trying to find the truth. Do you need to spend a lot of money to do this professionally?
Distrokid sponsors the Working Audio Tools podcast, and 30% off your first year subscription can be found in the podcast show notes and the YouTube video description. Hyperfollow is the easiest way to place all of your content in one single place, making finding all of your content super easy for your audience. Upload artwork for your release, edit the information, and apply links to all of the streaming platforms your music is going to be available, which of course on Distrokid is potentially all of them that exist now and even in the future. Add social media buttons so your audience can find you and your latest music video. Creating a beautiful landing page with a preview of your music is easy with Hyperfollow. Hyperfollow links can be created for all of your releases, and it enables you to create pre-save links for your audience to pre-order your music before it's released. This link is shareable on all of your platforms and a great way to promote your next release, only with Distrokid.
I would say, yeah, a little bit. Like, I don't know how much is too much, Ed, but like, you need to be, like, for speakers, in my personal opinion, to get at least decent translation, over $1,000 at least. And that's bottom budget, $1,000. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't you say so? Some shots in the comments.
However, the edifiers are good, but you know they do have a very, very specific presentation. I love listening.
Sorry, fuck off.
I love listening on them. I love listening to music on them because there's stuff in the top end. The phase clearance is really good. Transients are good. Separations is good. The low end is the best in this control room, without a shadow of a doubt. Not as good as the iLoud MTMs. Fuck, they don't even need a sub. They don't even need a sub. It's crazy. But again, there's a price difference. Like the MTM Precisions are like more than double the price. And then when you say Ed's like heard my MTM Precisions, was like for like $2,000. These are like really, really good for $2,000. But he's like, for him, they're not up to the scratch of his Amphions. And his Amphions are, were you talking the 218s? What are they? $6,000, and then was it $2,000 for
with an
7.5,
amp,
and then the amp, yeah. So I mean, you're talking like in speakers to get high quality in terms of, you know, less limitations. This is something I'm going to talk about in the video. I'm glad I've remembered. Is that the difficult thing is, and this is reality, whether you want to accept it or not, do what you want. Internet will be the internet, right? But if you genuinely believe that in regards to speakers, that you don't get what you pay for to a certain extent, you're being very, very, very naive. There is a difference in a pair of fucking PMC 6s to a pair of PMC Result 6s that don't have the transmission line compared to the PMC Result 6s, you know, compared to a pair of Calais. You know, compared, you know, the Calais, you know, to a pair of KRK Rockets, compare those KRK Rockets to JBLs.
What you're highlighting there is where people have the opposite of confirmation bias, anti-bias, as it were, or I don't have them, therefore they're shit, or I'm right because I can't afford them. It's like, well, it is equally as counterproductive, I think. We've mentioned, we've talked a lot about limitations in this episode and technological limitations, but what are your thoughts on our own limitations, or are you blindly, stubbornly refusing to admit any personal limitations because You know, there's always room for growth and improvement, and we belligerently plow through that and try and improve.
Thank you for that, because that was the end of the script. I think, honestly, I wrote the script like last week, but that was at the end of it. And it was all about, so we've talked about the limitations of, again, you've got limitations, even kind of your DACs, your amps, your interfaces, conversion, trying to manage distortion. You know what I mean? There's a reason why, you know, in regards to like external amplifiers, why an Amphion amplifier, just an external amplifier, costs £2,000, which is more than you know, a pair of MTM Precisions. You know what I mean? They're actives, but again, it's about distortion, and it's about trying to, you know, give yourself a linear, you know, representation, and with as least distortion and as much headroom as possible, more dynamic range. Like, this is
but
all
keeping it on human limitations.
Okay, so yes, you need to be very, very, very mindful of your own limitation. So the reason that many people spend so much money, as Ed's talked about it, but he can be quite hard on himself due to this, is that you have to be the weakest link in your chain. That's really the end goal. And at the end of the day, that's the thing that I always try and balance. So there's times where I'll know, right, this isn't working for me. So for example, yesterday was Sunday, I produced 2 or 3 mixes of that song, and the low end was just not there. And I tried something, and I genuinely tilted. I just tilted, and I just didn't have any enough sustain. And I thought that was right. And it was only until I listened to another reference track, and then I calibrated my ear again, and all of a sudden I was like, oh no, the nanos don't sound overly bassy now. No, this is correct. That was my limitation. And I think it's important that you don't let yourself get too much in your own head. Sometimes, you know, you do have to have that mind, that context, and that mindset of the song. This thing I might need to fix. Does the song sound good right now? You know what I mean? Big picture.
Yeah. We're both very good at micro focusing on thing, or focusing on the micro details, whereas the macro is right. Dynamics, energy, movement. Does it?
Yeah.
Are we listening to a song or are we listening to a mix? Because if you're listening to a mix, you've got it wrong. And we were talking about writing a book. Or I had this idea of turning. And in fact, if anyone's up for doing this, right, I'm sure we could figure something out with the publishing company that we haven't got yet. But I would love to turn all of our episodes, take the key phrases and turn them into a book. I think that would be wicked. And I'm going to put my own quote in. If you're listening to a mix, you've got it wrong. You should be listening to the song.
Yeah, and it is difficult to do. And that, again, is a limitation of, especially because for whatever reason, there is a lot of people on the spectrum in audio. Like, I was surprised how many people were on the spectrum. And what you'll find,
see it everywhere now that I know you.
I know, totally, yeah. It's fucking everywhere, man. The amount of comments I've had. But again, even like ADHD and stuff like that, it's so common. And again, I think mixers do have this critical thing where it's in our nature. And the reason that we like this stuff is because we like to, like, my wife says it all the time. She's like, Paul, why are you listening to that same bit over and over and over and over and over and over and over again? It doesn't even bother me. I'm so immersed in trying to get this, whatever this part of the song is. My wife's like, Paul, I could never be a mixer. Listen to the same thing 3 times. I'm like, shut up. I have to go into another room. But again, you know, the best
She must hate having to tell you the same thing 3 times.
Honestly, fucking hell. That's not just mixing. That's just life. Fucking all the time. I think the hard thing is that, you know, when you're trying to learn this and you're listening to these fucking big mixers, it's really difficult because they are getting like really good productions. We've heard some of the mixes that, again, when we were at Abbey Road with Jason Joshua, you know, you heard how good like the productions was he was getting. And again, you hear it on mix with the masters and you're like, fuck, that's good to go, man.
Yeah, the rough mixes are better than most things, anything we've done. It's like,
I know. So right, for guys like your Manny's, if you listen to guys like Manny, he'll talk all the time about, you know, I'm all about vibe and I'm all about the song. What does the song need and how does the vibe? And Manny is one of these mixers that's most respected, you know, for the vibe. Spike, I think Spike's quite a technical mixer. He's got good vibe and his energy's the thing with Spike, but he's definitely critical. Like, I listen to a Spike mix.
contrast is what Spike nails.
He's definitely technical. There's no way on earth anybody can tell me Spike Stent isn't technical. There's no way on earth anybody can tell me the Serban Gannett isn't technical.
I think they're all technical because they've all had to go through the fixing shit phase that everyone has to go through. I'm not just going to say we're in it, but we have to go through it. That's how they cut their teeth and learn all these things. I just wonder if they had a mentor along the way to have the kind of conversations that we're having on a regular basis.
Most of them all did. Yeah, most of them all did. Most of them were T-boys, T-girls. Some of them would, just stay in the studio for, weeks and weeks on end, and, not sleep and stuff.
Or maybe what they're witnessing in being those T-boy, in those T-boy girl then they positions is the conversations of the senior engineers being like, right, well, hang on, this is a problem. Right, if we do this mid-side thing, we can fix it. And if they're a sponge and they take it in, maybe they've absorbed a lot of that without necessarily actively having to trial and error and fail themselves. They've absorbed it. Yeah,
and that's like what I love about the certain mixers. Like I love the Scheps story for the fact that he still had a really, really, really cheap pair of headphones that he really knew as a tool. He knew, I think he was probably using them for the whole NS10 thing because he wasn't relying on the low end, and he kind of like the tantrums. They were probably his like NS10 Auratone on headphones, and he kind of knew that sounding, he knew how to use it. But again, what it shows is that the limitations of those headphones weren't enough because he had to go out and spend fucking 70 grand on speakers. And then again, he's got the Odyssey MX4s. And what's really important to know is that, again, as I spoke about in the other video it did really well, the 70k one, was that, it's all about finding the monitoring that speaks to you, and that's the journey. That's what people don't want to do. People want to get on the internet these days and go, bro, tell me what to buy. Tell me what interface to buy. Tell me what headphones to buy. I'm mixing this and that and that. What headphones would work for this? I'm like, how do I... I can only give you my perception, but, that's what I'm doing. I'm like rabbit holing mixes so I can get the mistakes now, and I could learn. I want to get to a point where I can get to, a level where I'm not really needing that anymore. Ditch it. Like it was an interesting thing where it was like reading interviews about speakers and Spike Stent, and what they would say is they would bring lots of speakers in. So Spike would constantly be trying new speakers in. He had the PMCs, the PMC 226s, he had the Barefoots, he had other ones, and I think as his head engineer would say, there's always new pairs of speakers coming in. And what we would do is we'd leave it a certain amount of time and we'd watch to see how much they're getting used. And then as soon as we knew he wasn't using them, we'd just take them away. He wouldn't even know it and would just take them away. And then that's why he's at a point where he's still on those vintage KRKs. You know what I mean? They're vintage KRKs.
And Neumann 120s.
And Neumann 120s. Yep. So,
I wouldn't have sold if I'd found that out.
Yeah. And to be fair, they are still expensive for a small speaker. I mean, what size of woofer are the 120s?
Can't remember.
Yeah, like 5 or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they do sound better than the Callies. It's interesting because the Callies and Neumann sound similar-ish in terms of they're flat and they're boring, but the Neumanns have better phase coherence, they have better transients, they do have better low end.
I just wonder if your speakers are too far apart in your room.
No, well, to be fair, I mean, I'm looking at them now. I mean, it's pretty close, to be fair. I think they're probably closer than what you've got yours just now, I would say. And I've tried the Callies everywhere. I've tried them, like, narrower, further back, and wider, further back.
Can you trust yourself, and how do you trust yourself? And how do you trust translation? Because at the end of the day, it's still all subject to opinion. What you think translates, and this is part of our mix critiques. We each do a mix that we think, yeah, cool. We don't put it out unless we're happy with it. For a draft one, we always go back and tweak things when we have a bit of time off. But we usually do some translation checks, and our opinion is, cool, this works. And then we each have a very different opinion on each other's mix, which means that we have a different opinion on translation.
Yeah.
Which obviously, as we know, we've discussed, we hear things differently as well. So is it that maybe we're at a point where we just need to embrace being a different mix engineer to the next person And you or I could do mixes that in their own way work, translate in their own way to different things, and the client's going to go A or B.
Yeah, that's really where me and you are heading. I think that's what our final aim is that we both have great mixes, like when they had the Chad Blake and the Spike Stent thing. Remember we watched in my house, where it was like the Peter Gabriel album. Two very
different,
very
great in their own right, and the client's going to go, let's put both on a double-sided album,
which is what he does.
Said no one except Peter Gabriel.
So yeah, again, even those two mixers, arguably two of the most famous engineers of all time, two very, very, very different sounds, two very, very different perspectives of the mix, two different forms of translation. But again, I think the only way that you're going to be able to find how you fit, because I always talk about, again, this is how we'll kind of end this, is that one of the main things that my experiment taught me in the speakers, right, where I tried to mix the exact same multi-track and get them one-to-one, was my main aim is for my mixes to translate how they sounded in the room. That is really important because that's my intention. That's the reason why I didn't like the Scheps 65s. Ed really liked the way that they translated, but they didn't sound the way that they translated in the room. They sounded softer. They didn't sound as punchy. They just didn't sound as mid-forward.
I remember talking and you being like, what are you on about? They don't sound like that in my room. I'm like, well, that's how they sound in my room.
Yeah. So if for example, a client gives you a brief and you've gone in with that intention and it doesn't come out the way that you wanted to on average, then again, it's going to be difficult for you, especially if you get client feedback and they're like, no, I want more of this, or I want you to do this. And you're not hearing the truth in your room, and you give them back the feedback, you give them back the recall, and they're like, no, you've still not got it right, dude. What's going on? It's a hard thing. It's a journey.
At the end of the day, though, that's the easy part. Being told what to do. If someone says, I want more bass, cool, whack it up like a dB, 2 dB, 3 dB. Make it obvious. Getting told what to do is definitely easier than trying to figure this stuff out and make a decision. Trust your instinct, trust your musicality, trust your ears, trust your monitoring, trust your room. Fuck that. Trust that the crossovers in a 4 grand Trinov Nova are going to work properly. What? Or just someone say, yeah, can you raise the bass guitar a dB and lower the guitars a dB? Easy, mate. Done.
Yeah, and see the thing that annoyed me the most about that video, right? I'm glad I remember this right in the very end of the video, is that every time somebody left a comment of, well, I mix on such and such, or an untreated bedroom, or I mix on cheap monitors, or I mix on that, and my mixes sound amazing. This guy doesn't know what he's speaking about. He's purposely confusing this, all of this for views. I would leave one comment and I would say, cool, can you please share a link to some of your mixes? Or at least, again, put down some song names, some titles, some artists that you've worked with so we could listen to your stuff. Not one. I'm talking, I did it to over, I think it was 25 people I commented back. Not one had the balls to go, there's my mix. I actually had 4 guys get back to me and they were in the same things that I have nothing to prove to you. I was like, well, yeah, that says a lot. That says a lot. If you have the balls to say on the internet that, yeah, I mix on such and such and my translation's great and my mixes sound amazing on that, and you don't have the confidence for any random to hear it, there's an issue then.
And fuck off. Yep.
And that's quite what we frankly need. We need more accountability. That's what this video, I wanted to make the video for.
We need more accountability in the whole world. I mean,
we do.
On every level. Not just
especially on the audio community and the internet. It's that, yes, there is, in many cases, you do get what you pay for. And yes, I'm sorry, but if you want to do this professionally, you do have to invest to get monitoring that tells you the truth. And normally, to have monitoring that has less limitations, that has more quality, you are going to have to pay more.
I have a poignant question, Paul, to round this off.
Okay.
What's the most expensive speaker you've paid for?
The Atmos setup. I paid for all the Atmos setup. So the Callies.
I mean, that's a bit of a cop-out. Bit of a cop-out.
Loophole.
Fair play, you found the loophole.
Yes. And on that note, I'm just going to end it there. Fucking great. Smashing.
On that ginger bombshell.
As always, leave your comments down below and, discuss. Right? I don't want this to be a toxic place. I just want there to be, a discussion had where there's a
It won't.
reality.
Toxic comments will get ignored.
Yeah, I know.
If we don't reply to your comment, there's a reason.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, most of you we reply to because we like you very much. Thanks for
Yes.
listening. Thanks for watching. It's been emotional. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye-bye.